What is it? It is passion and style, heritage and diversity, creativity and innovation, but there's so much more to it. Everyday visionaries, original and refined, stubbornly authentic, with unmatched quality on our mind. Every time you live it, wear it, feel it, taste it, you'll know it's true. It is our brand, cool and unique. Italy is simply extraordinary. Be it.
Good evening, everyone. My name is 𝗵𝗲 𝗟𝗏. I'm the director of the Italian Cultural Institute in Los Angeles. Welcome to all of you who are here with us tonight in person, but also a warm welcome goes to everyone who's joining us online. We have had more than 800 registrants for this evening program, so thank you for joining us from not only the area around LA, but also from the rest of the United States and the world, really. For tonight, we have a presentation by Dr. Julian Brooks titled By Time Erased, The Lost Murals of Renaissance Rome, which is organized in collaboration with the Getty Museum. The video that you have just watched is part of a national campaign to promote Italy abroad now that international travels eased a little bit. We just wanted to send out a gentle reminder about how incredible our country is. And you know, we just celebrated a few days ago our National Day, so you will allow us a little bit of pride. Tonight we will find out another reason why Italy is so special, and more specifically an aspect of the city of Rome that is not so well known, or at least is not so well known in its full extent. But it's the subject of a very interesting exhibit at the Getty Center in Los Angeles, aptly titled The Lost Murals of Renaissance Rome. This exhibition, which opened on May 31st and will be on view until September 4th, considers a once prominent feature of the Roman palazzos of the Renaissance. In fact, these palazzos facades were very beautifully decorated with stuccos, frescoes, and graffiti, which were depicting, for example, battles of heroic deeds. And these once spectacular pieces of art have mostly disappeared nowadays. They were erased by time. But this exhibit at the Getty does a great job providing insights on this form of art, and presents works by artists like Federico Zuccaro, who sketched some of these decorations, and his sketches are now part of the collection at the Getty. But what makes this exhibition even more interesting is the fact that it is paired with another show, which is Judy Baca Hitting the Wall, which focuses on the design, painting, destruction, and restoration of Judy Baca's mural made here in Los Angeles for the Olympic Games in 1984. So even if these two subjects are worlds apart in terms of time and space, they share the same fragility and preservation issues. As you know, mural art is one of the most prominent features of the landscape of Los Angeles, and it's becoming very prominent in Italy and in Rome as well. And with this, the idea of acknowledging this form of art, preserving it before it gets erased by time. And Tonight, guiding us through this very special itinerary through Renaissance Rome and probably even beyond, we have the curator of these two shows at the Getty, Dr. Julian Brooks. Julian Brooks is Senior Curator and head of the Department of Drawings at the John Paul Getty Museum in Los Angeles. He's a specialist in Italian and British drawings. His past exhibitions include 𝗧𝗵𝗲 Mind to Paper in 2006, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 and Federico 𝗧𝗵𝗲, Artists Brothers in Renaissance Rome in 2007, Leonardo da Vinci and the Art of Sculpture in 2010, and more recently, Michelangelo, Mind of the Master in 2020. Amongst these upcoming projects, there is William Blake, Visionary, which will open at the Getty in the fall of 2023. He joined the Getty Museum in 2004, and we are very honored to have him here tonight at the Italian Cultural Institute. Please welcome on stage Dr. Julian Brooks. Grazie mille.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you so much anyway to all of you here in person. So happy to see you all here. And thank you to those joining online as well. It's really such a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the kind introduction, Emanuele. So, Emanuele just told me he's from Rome, so, you know, I better tread carefully, right? So, just imagine you're in Rome, you've woken up, you're well-rested, beautiful, fresh morning air drifting in, maybe a smell of coffee, pastries being baked, flowers, cigarettes probably. And you're very happy because a friend of yours has given you an itinerary for the day to walk around Rome and to go and have a look at some of the murals and some of the lost murals that are in the city. And let's see, we need the screen, there we go. So, just to orient you, you can see here the Vatican at top left. Obviously, this is Rome as it is right now. And you can see Piazza Navona there to the right of the bend in the river. And all the red dots, which I'll zoom in on now, you can see the red dots, which are the different places we'll be visiting today. We're going to start at the bottom lower right of the screen. We're going to, in our itinerary, our little walk around Rome today, we're going to start there, and we're going to set off at a clip to go and see the Palazzo Mattei. And we arrive, and the itinerary showed you this amazing Palazzo Barberini of the Palazzo Mattei as it was being decorated. And so you have this in mind, to spring in your step, you walk down the road, you arrive in the Piazza Mattei, and gone. A bit of a bust, this one. So you think, well, okay, nothing remaining, but I'm going to find out a little bit more about the painting and work from it that way. So this painting relates to a drawing, which is in the J. Paul Getty Museum, at top left. And they're both by Federico 𝗧𝗵𝗲, a late 16th century Florentine artist, Marchigian artist, who worked in Florence and Rome and traveled around Europe. And so these two creations, the drawing and the painting, both show his older brother Taddeo. And you can see Taddeo up on the scaffolding, just on the left-hand side of the building there. And he's busy painting the facade. And you can see that the facade is fully decorated. You can see there are all these figures admiring it. This is it's 1548, when Taddeo 𝗧𝗵𝗲 is painting the facade. But the painting and the drawing were both made in about 1595, a bit later, by, as I said, by Taddeo's younger brother, Federico. And you'll see all the figures that are admiring these murals. And in the drawing, there are actually inscriptions at the bottom to tell you exactly who they are. So we have, for instance, on the right here, we have Giorgio Vasari, who you will all know from the lives of the artists. And then here, on a horse, is Michelangelo. And we know that in his latter days in Rome, Michelangelo went around Rome on a donkey. But Federico Zuccaro has here upgraded him to a horse, a little bit more fitting, right, for Michelangelo. So we have Michelangelo. Everyone is admiring, lauding Taddeo Zuccaro's great creation with the facade. And this drawing is actually a part of a series of 20 sheets that are all in the Getty collection and now actually on display at the Getty Museum in the exhibition, The Lost Murals of Renaissance Rome. And murals are a sort of leitmotif all the way through this series of drawings. And I'll just give you a glimpse of them here. And here again, they tell his story as he arrives in Rome, age 14. And Taddeo is sort of, he tries to get an apprenticeship, is turned away from that. He eventually gets an apprenticeship, and you see him top left. And what's he doing? He's just forced into essentially domestic servitude instead of learning the art of painting, which he's meant to be allowed to be doing. So, and then you see on the right him copying an antique sarcophagus in the front and copying facade frescoes in the background. And then in the end, you'll see him also in the series studying, antiquities in the Vatican, studying Michelangelo's Last Judgment on the right, and the Raphael frescoes and the Farnesino on the left. But the highlight of the series was this drawing and the painting. And you can see, this is Taddeo's moment where he's finally made it. He wins his first commission. We know that 𝗥𝗲_𝗟, who commissioned this palace from him, these decorations, because Taddeo was only 18, 𝗥𝗲 made him do a trial of like one section. And Taddeo Zuccaro really impressed him so much that Vasari, in his account, records that 𝗥𝗲_𝗟 was not only satisfied but stupefied with the results. And the destination for all of these designs were Federico Zuccaro's own house, the Palazzo Zuccaro, now the Biblioteca Hertziana in Rome. And many of you will know this wonderful doorway, Mannerist, classic so-called Mannerist doorway with a mouth, designed by Federico himself. And the series were due to be arranged around a room in something like this. You would have, you will have noticed some of the strange shapes of the drawings, and they were arranged around the squares and in this sort of format. And Federico wanted his palace after he died to be a refuge for young artists. So what a great subject, the fact that Taddeo is learning the trade of painting and then becomes wins his first big commission with the Palazzo Mattei. So the question for us now is, using these, given that there's nothing on the facade now, can we actually recreate some of it? And thankfully the answer is yes. As you see, nothing left, but we actually know a number of drawings. Thanks to Vasari's account, Vasari describes how the whole series, the whole facade is decorated with the deeds of Furius Camillus. And we have a number of drawings that relate to that subject that we can then tie to this facade. And this is one of them, which happens to be in the J. Paul Getty Museum as well, and in the exhibition. And in this, you see Roman soldiers triumphantly carrying the captured city of Veio here. And if you look in the painting that we were just looking at of Taddeo decorating the facade, you can see you can just make out within the blue circle the same figures carrying this city. So we know that this is a drawing for that part of it. And this is a drawing that relates to the facade. And all these facades recorded generally, heroic Roman feats. And, it was literally the citizens of Rome cementing their civic pride in the walls of the city. And there are other drawings too. So for instance, for this other section, there's this drawing that's now in a collection on the East Coast, as you see for this soldier who's turning a horse. And you can see that it was a drawing for that section. And this, the drawings you can see were made in this amazing technique on blue paper normally, and then a very heavy technique of wash and pen and ink over black chalk underdrawing, and then with white heightening, a very rich mix of media that mimicked the facade frescoes that were going to be in this sort of chiaroscuro technique. And one of the wonderful things with having some of these drawings is you can then actually take it a step back further, because we can link it to this wonderful life drawing by 𝗧𝗵𝗲 which is in the Metropolitan Museum. And you see how he's treating the live model, really getting the torque, the twisting pose of this figure. And there are a couple of other drawings that also relate to this facade, but we don't actually know exactly where they went. But this is a drawing in the British Museum of the Gaul general Brennus. And we know that this was one of the scenes on the facade as well. And there's another scene, a drawing in the Louvre, with this scene with the Roman citizens who are giving their jewelry to make up the gift of thanksgiving to Apollo for their great victory. So we've seen the Palazzo Mattei, we've seen there's nothing there. So, you maybe don't have quite such a spring in your step now, but it's getting to mid-morning, and so you need an espresso. So where do you go? You go to the Piazza Sant'Eustachio, to the Caffè Sant'Eustachio. And this is where you will find a very fine Caffè Granita, and this will put the spring back in your step, guaranteed. And thankfully, in the Piazza Sant'Eustachio is indeed a surviving facade fresco by none other than Federico Zuccaro, the younger brother of Taddeo. And this is one that you may all know. It shows Sant'Eustachio at top there. And this, as you see, it's reasonably well preserved now. But as you see, it's on a corner site too. So if you were to walk left around the building, you would find this side, and there's much, much less of this facade remaining. You can see at top right there that there's a few fragments. Some of the scenes, we know that actually it was the birth of Sant'Eustachio, and it was the baptism of Sant'Eustachio on the top right. And there are prints after these scenes, and so we know what they look like, even if they don't survive. And with the main scene of the Vision of St. Eustace, where it's a Roman general who goes and he's out hunting, and he sees a stag with a cross between its antlers, and that's what converts him to Christianity. And so you can see here in the fresco, you can see him kneeling there, but it's all prepared in a drawing that's now in the Metropolitan Museum on the left-hand side of the screen here. And you can see that it's a very colored, fully colored modello for this particular scene. And, you can see on the right how the fresco is degraded. The colors have become a bit flat. You've lost the articulation in the folds. Some areas of the scene you can't make out. But obviously, in the proprietary watercolor that still survives, it's all, perfectly preserved. And we know that the two brothers actually fell out over this particular commission, because this was Federico's big first commission. And this is a fresco that's actually in the Palazzo Zuccari in Rome. And you see Federico on left and Taddeo at right. And Federico is looking up admiringly at Taddeo. But as I said, when Federico was making this fresco, Taddeo, Vasari records how Taddeo, who reflected that the work was in a public place and that it was of great importance to the credit of Federico, at times insisted on retouching and improving some part. Federico, having had patience for some time, finally seized a mason's hammer, smashed to the ground some of what Taddeo had painted, and in his rage stayed several days without going home. Eventually the two were reconciled, on the understanding that Taddeo should be able to set his hand on the drawings and cartoons of Federico as he liked, but never works in fresco, oil, or any other medium. So, happy ending of sorts. So now, we've been with the Zuccari all the time, but there are two great practitioners of Roman facade painting, and we need to go and see an example of their work. So let's head off to the Palazzo Ricci. The espresso is still coursing through our veins, giving us the energy to push on. So Palazzo Ricci, here we come. And it's in the Piazza dei Ricci. And I always think it's a little unfair because the Ricci family actually only bought the palace in about 1575, long after it was decorated, but still it's called the Palazzo Ricci, so be it. And you can see here that there's a certain amount remaining on the facade, some scenes, but some scenes that are totally lost. But then when you look at the facade as it was at the end of the 19th century, you can see just how much has actually been lost. The one slightly comforting factor about this photograph is that there was an artist called Luigi Fontana at the end of the 19th century who went around, well, he didn't go around, he was commissioned to refresh some of these facades. And some of this is his work. For instance, the top, not quite the very top story, but the second top story of the facade as you see it on the left, with all the groteschi, is purely Fontana's imagination. That was never painted by Polidoro and Maturino, who painted this facade. But you can see how much better, what good shape the two strands around the piano nobile are, and how much has been lost from that ever since. But luckily, some of that can be recreated by prints too. So we have here a couple of prints by Cherubino Alberti, which recreate some of the scenes that were lost above the piano nobile there. They're now totally gone. And you can see here also just how over the door there are these figures of captives. But there are also bronze arms and trophies as well. And those are painted actually in sort of the golden color as well. And you see how accessible this facade is. So if you're a young artist wanting to copy the works of Polidoro and Maturino, what a great place to go and to be in the piazza there to sketch. And a lot of these facades are now known really through copy drawings and drawn copies made of them. And I know you can barely make this out, but this is, if you imagine that you're copying the whole of the facade above the door there, what do? You get like a bunch of bits of paper and stick them all together and make this one long drawn copy. And in this scene, we see this whole strand of the facade actually shows the Roman general Murals Scaevola. And here you see, I think this is one of my favorite parts of this whole facade. And it's just so inventive because the artist has to show Murals Scaevola crossing the Tiber. But how does he do that? Is he going to show on a bridge? Does he have the army with him? Is he swimming in the river? But instead, so as you can see within the blue circle here, he has Murals Scaevola stepping over a reclining river god of the Tiber. So he literally just stepping over the Tiber. And in this, the artist can sort of show his inventiveness, but also, show that he knows about ancient reclining river gods, statues of river gods. And then on the right-hand side, you see the scene with Murals Scaevola, and with his arm in the flame, his hand in the flames, to show that to show his fearlessness to 𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗟ន់, the Etruscan general. And this, I think, is the Palazzo Ricci is the one that's at the back of this scene in the life of Taddeo Zuccaro as depicted by his younger brother Federico. And it's a wonderful scene where you see him being turned away from an apprenticeship. But in the background, he goes and sketches a facade fresco, and I think it's this very one. Now, by this time, you've worked up an appetite. It's lunchtime, and thankfully, there's a restaurant right there in the piazza. So it's a very good seafood restaurant called Pierluigi. So you sit down, have a good meal, relax, maybe a glass of Frascati wine to go with it. But not too much because you still have the afternoon, right? So, take it easy. So you relax and you think about your next step. And now you make your way up to the Via della Maschera d'Oro, which is where you've been told that there is one of the best preserved examples of facade frescoes in Rome. And we just need to remember how famous these works were. Now nobody knows of them, nobody talks about them. But at the time in Rome, artists were flocking to Rome. They would copy the Sistine Chapel, they would copy Raphael's Farnesina, the Antiquities. But all the time they would be copying these facade frescoes in perfect shape. And as Vasari observed in 1550, it's been seen continually in Rome and is still seen that all the draftsmen are inclined more to the works of Polidoro and Maturino than to the rest of our modern pictures. And this is very important, that it's actually not just Polidoro da Caravaggio, but it's also Maturino da Firenze. And Polidoro da Caravaggio, obviously, we need to distinguish from Michelangelo Merisi, who was from the same city, the same town, Caravaggio. But Polidoro, although he works in chiaroscuro, it's a very different type of chiaroscuro, and he wasn't accused of murdering anyone, as far as we know. But Maturino, we just know nothing about. And this is the weird thing. Everyone knows Polidoro, geeks like me know Polidoro. But Maturino, people just don't know. But Vasari talks about how closely they work together. And he says, the love of Maturino for Polidoro and Polidoro for Maturino so increased that they determined like brothers and true companions to live and die together. And uniting their ambitions, their purses, and their labors, they set themselves to work together in the closest harmony and concord. And so I've made it my personal project to try and sort of rehabilitate Maturino. And I'm trying to find drawings by him that relate to fresco projects he worked on with Polidoro. And this is a drawing that's actually in a Los Angeles private collection and is in the exhibition at the Getty. And it has an old inscription to Maturino on the bottom left of the drawing. And I think it has a very good claim to be by his hand. There are also sketches on the back that are very distinctive. So you make your way to the Via della Maschera d'Oro, the street of the Golden Mask. And the first thing you notice is what a narrow street it is. Like, you've been looking at these piazzas with facade frescoes on. But here you're going to a narrow street. But you can just about see the Palazzo Milesi there on the left, which has still very well preserved a lot of the Polidoro and Maturino facade paintings. And you can see along the main course here, you can see the story of 𝗵𝗶, and then you see these fictive bronze statues that are arranged between the windows. And in this case, you can see, how the fresco is preserved, but it's still degraded, and it's sort of fading. There are elements that are just stronger than others. And this is a particularly famous figure with his horse that is copied in a drawing. It's actually an Italian late 16th century drawing that's in the British Museum, but it was actually retouched by Peter Paul Rubens. And Rubens had a habit of collecting old drawings and then making them better, which, if you're Rubens, is a good thing, I guess. So this is a famous pose and was much copied at the time. And you can see not only the fictive bronze figures, but also above at top right and left, and here at right and left, that there were also vases or vases that decorated this facade, also in this bronze-tinted color. And these were also copied a great deal, and just for the inventiveness of their creations. And you see here a lovely drawing in the British Museum that shows one of them, and it's made on blue paper in pen and ink, showing the whole vase, and just very beautiful, and it preserves this vase from the facade. And the vases were also famous that they were also reproduced in prints, again by 𝗏𝗏 𝗟𝗏𝗏. And you see here, a marvelous test of calligraphy as well at the bottom, but also how the same vase has here been rendered in the print. And these weren't actual vases, or as far as I know, ever actually made into vases, but they were just these wonderful creations that could have been what the ancient Romans were drinking their wine from. So you see here, the facade is still remaining, it's still in good shape, but a lot of the details can actually be better observed by the prints that were made after this, after the facade. So this is a print by somebody called 𝗏𝗏 who was working around 1650 or so, and he did a series of prints after the Palazzo Milesi that you see here. But it wasn't until the 19th century that somebody thought about essentially gathering all the evidence and putting it together in one image. And this was Ernesto Maccari, who carefully copied every single angle of and every single part of the facade. And when you look at it like this, you think, was it really on this narrow street? And you think, surely it was on a piazza. And you think, well, maybe it was, maybe the building was opposite. Now it was not opposite at the time. But then you realize that actually the building opposite was also had occupied by some of the most famous facade frescoes in Rome at the time, but they're now totally gone. So on the left, the yellow arrow points to the Palazzo Gaddi, and the green arrow on the right was the Palazzo Milesi we've just been looking at. And they were both done in the 1520s by Polidoro Maturino. The Milesi on the right we've just looked at, we've seen pretty well preserved. The Palazzo Gaddi on the left now looks like that. There's nothing at all remains. At one point, it looked like this. This is a drawing in the Albertina, and it shows, just like Maccari produced his section with all the different elements shown, this has the Palazzo Gaddi and all the elements of the Palazzo Gaddi laid out. But this drawing dates to the late 16th century, so it's pretty close to, only about 70 years after Polidoro. And you can see, it is in great detail, and you can see how carefully everything is studied and copied. And again, you have this scene here with these are the early settlers of Rome making their way to Rome. And you can see how they're rendered there, and again, copied in a print by Pietro Santi Bartoli in the 17th century. And if you want to see a blow-up of this drawing, the Albertina drawing, come to the Getty, because it's on display in the exhibition, and you can also see the Pietro Santi Bartoli engravings as well that were made after this facade, which is now totally gone, but which is recorded in these engravings and in this drawing. So as you make your way out of the Via della Maschera d'Oro, you think, time for a little something, in the time-honored words of Winnie the Pooh. And it's mid-afternoon, it's hot, obviously, gelato. So, you're deciding to go to Giolitti, near the Pantheon, which is not so far away and where you can have whatever you choose. I don't know, strawberry, chocolate, combination, something like that. I do remember once being told by somebody serving ice cream that I couldn't have the two flavors I wanted because they didn't go well together. And I can't remember what they were, but kudos to them. So you have your ice cream in hand and you stroll across the Piazza Navona towards the last stop on our little itinerary today. And that is the Palazzo Massimo Istoriato on the south end of the Piazza Navona. And this is probably the most seen of the surviving facade frescoes that still remains. But it's also the most mysterious. We don't actually know who did these frescoes, for instance. They've been attributed to Baldassare Peruzzi, who we know worked in the palace. They've been attributed to a pupil of Daniele da Volterra, who also worked in the palace, but we don't know. But we do know that they were made in 1523, commissioned in 1523 by Domenico Massimo on the occasion of the wedding of his son, Angelo. And there's thankfully an old photograph from the late 19th century that shows them as they were then. And we can see that actually, they have lost quite a lot, but they're still in reasonable shape. One thing I think is interesting is you'll see in the modern day photograph at top left, you'll see the addition of a column that was put there in the 1950s. Sort of the masculinization of the space, perhaps. But you can see how, we still have pretty much all of the facade. But you can also see some of the degradation. These frescoes were also refreshed by our friend Luigi Fontana, who worked on the Palazzo Ricci, and he refreshed these in 1877. And so they're definitely faded a lot since then, and nobody, I think, has refreshed them since. And you can see what happens here, that basically the facade deteriorates, it loses form, and then probably eventually what happens is the owner of the palace says, okay, I'm going to just, whitewash the lot and, be done with it. The best preserved pieces are actually right under the eaves of the roof, protected there better from the elements. And this shows a wedding scene, presumably perfectly suited for the commemoration of the wedding in 1523. So we've had this itinerary. We've been around all these different palaces. We've seen some facades that remain, some facades that can be recreated, some facades that are totally gone. And I think, one slightly comforting factor is that a lot of them had disappeared, were beginning to disappear already, even at the end of the 16th century. So as you see here from the minutes of the Accademia di San Luca in Rome in 1593, and these were minutes that were talking about how young artists could matriculate to the next step, that young artists were required to bring some drawing to the liking of the Principe, taken from some work of a past master, and of Polidoro's frescoes in particular, which are in danger of being lost and by time erased. And so, we see how much the copy drawings that were made in this period were actually, they were almost made to record these, and they are now often the only thing that we have remaining. So I do urge you to come if you can, come to the Getty and have a look at these two exhibitions. There's the Lost Murals of Renaissance Rome, featuring some of the material we talked about, but also a room of drawings by Judy Backer, an LA muralist, relating to her 1984 mural, Hitting the Wall, which are downtown. The mural is downtown on the 4th Street exit of the 110 going north. And we have all the drawings that prepare it. And it's really fabulous and a great sort of pair of shows. So I do hope you'll be able to come and visit. And thank you so much for your attention this evening.
so much, Julian. This was extremely interesting, and as someone who is originally from Rome, I found it not only very informative, but I have to tell you that it nailed down some of the best spots for you to go while you are in town, because the gelato is to die for.
So jolly tea is the one. Get your gelato.
So we have now some time for questions with our audience, and I would like to start maybe with the people here in the theater, if you have any questions for our curator, and then we'll select a few questions from our audience online.
Do we have any idea how many there were at one time?
I mean, it's funny because the figures vary wildly, but there were so many. I mean, I've heard, 200 facades across Rome. There were definitely at least 50 or so, but I think probably the variance in the figure comes because some facades just had, one mural, one part, whereas others were like totally, as you've seen with some of the ones we've looked at this evening, some were like absolutely plastered, literally in these murals. But I mean, they were just ubiquitous, absolutely ubiquitous. And of course, we've been thinking about Rome this evening, but really they're all over, particularly Italy, in North Italy, in Verona, Venice, many places, and all over, particularly in Southern Europe. We know there are some in Spain. Northern Europe, less so perhaps because the weather was less was less conducive to painting them, but definitely all over Italy and all over Rome for sure.
Thank you for this question that actually starts very well with a question from Eileen, who's asking, how did this trend came about in Rome when in the 16th century they decided to start painting the facades of these buildings?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think we're not actually sure. There are various prototypes that happen, in fact, more in northern Italy in the later 15th century. And, I've sometimes wondered if it's the fact that Polidoro comes from Caravaggio in northern Italy, sort of comes into this too somehow. But it seems to be something that emerges in northern Italy. It takes off, and then suddenly in Rome, you have this amazing moment where all these artists are there. There's a great patronage, there's great wealth, Rome in the Renaissance, and obviously I think it's sort of something. There's that sense of one-upmanship, and when you see those two palaces, the Palazzo Milesi and Gaddi, that are like right opposite each other across a narrow street, you can't help but feel that it's like, okay, you could do that, but I can do it too. It's this sort of sense of competition. And so I think then it just, particularly in Rome, it just really takes off. In the 1520s, and Polidoro, Maturino, we know that Vasari says they painted over 50 facades themselves. And so it just, and then I think everyone wants them, every surface has to be covered.
It was maybe sort of a demonstration of power
as
well. So maybe we have more questions here in our theater?
Can we see those murals as trompe-l'œil? Because they seem to represent sculptural 3D panels or sculptures. Is there any actual building having real 3D monumental sculpture like that?
Yeah, no, thank you. It's a great question. Not as far as we know. I think they were all intended to mimic basically ancient Rome and to evoke ancient Roman palaces. So, as you say, it's all trompe-l'œil. It's all meant to be, to mimic ancient reliefs set into the facade, and ancient bronze statues, as we've seen, but none that, but nobody, as far as I can tell, actually did real reliefs, real bronze statues. It was all trompe-l'œil. And incredibly impressive. And this is something that you see when you're thinking about artists studying these things from street level. They're looking up at the facade and and often you'll find these copy drawings that then omit, the bottom because they literally cannot see it,
Thank you. And I would like to ask you a question, which is also very interesting. Linda online is asking, do we know what the interiors of these buildings were like? And do we know if, what was painted outside was related to what was painted or decorated inside?
It's fascinating. I think certainly, it seems sometimes, that palaces, you have a sort of a scheme of refurbishment that involves like the interiors and the exteriors, and there's clearly, some juxtaposition. But in the end, like the facade is so much more for public consumption, and the inside is more, perhaps to impress certain guests. It's a much more limited audience. And, I'm sure if you look hard enough, I'm sure there are examples where you can find really nice relationships between the interior and exterior. I don't personally know of any, where there's a really strong correlation, but often you do just get these campaigns where the work is all done at the same time, but there doesn't seem to be this big linking between the subject matter. It's not like that a narrative that is shown outside continues inside, for example, as far as I know.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question in the room and maybe one more question from our online audience.
Thank you. How long it took to organize this exhibition, like finding the drawings and bringing all the material together?
Yeah, how long to organize the exhibition? It's funny, it's something that's been a passion of mine for many, many years. So, the Getty Museum acquired that series, the 20 drawings by Federico Zuccaro, back in 1999. And I was studying them even then. I was then, doing my doctorate at Oxford, but I was fascinated by them. And even then I was collecting material on this subject. And of course the trouble is with the exhibition, how do you organize an exhibition of stuff that's basically gone? So, the museum, obviously, the Getty has this Zuccaro series, so that's a logical part of it. That's one room. And that really, there's such amazing drawings, and they have such detail. It's such a compelling narrative. And then we also had, our colleagues at the Getty Research Institute had a number of the prints that relate to the lost facades by Pietro Santi Bartoli, but also by Hendrik Holtzius and other really, amazing prints. So, sort of getting them together. But, a couple of years. There's no publication, sadly, for this, no book. And so a couple of years, but then obviously the pandemic hit, and so it was delayed a couple of years too. So, we're, several years out. But it's something I'm fascinated by, and I would actually love to go on and study more and really, maybe make properly an inventory of the facades as they were and drawings that relate to them, et cetera, et cetera. But, who knows if one will ever have time to do that. But it would be a great project for sure, right?
Thank you. And I would like to close with one final question, which was asked by really many people online, and that kind of project us also towards the future, because many people are asking if you are aware of restoration projects for these buildings, if anything is happening to preserve what's remaining. But I would also like to tie this question with the process of restoring modern murals and street art, really, in the sense that, do you feel there is a different attitude towards, for example, restoring these pieces of art, which would be considered classical now, and restoring something like Judy Baca's mural, for example?
Yeah, it's something I've often pondered, but when one thinks about Rome now and all these facades, and you think about the Palazzo Milesi, it will, in the end, it'll just gradually deteriorate until it is, refreshed. And I think this is the thing, nowadays we're perhaps much more squeaming about refreshing that work, like who would take it on? Who is going to be the one, refreshing Polidoro Maturino doing the facade. It seemed really inappropriate. And I think it's a sort of tricky question. I mean, back in the 19th century, they had a very different attitude, and Luigi Fontana went around, went around restoring all these facades, refreshing them, adding whole bits that weren't there. Now, we wouldn't do that. It comes to the sense of Los Angeles too, and all these murals, and it's something that Judy Backer has been vocal about. Like, whose job is it to preserve these, to restore these? I mean, her mural hitting the wall, we chose that one. It was sort of incredible, but actually in 2019, when I first went to talk to her about that exhibition, hitting the wall had literally just been whitewashed by Caltrans and LA Metro, and as part of a graffiti removal campaign, and it's just like, how can that happen? And then she sued to reinstate it. While the court case was going on, they whitewashed it again. And in the end, she won the court case. She could restore it. She had this coating on it. She could take off the whitewash. Actually, a lot of it was preserved, and she could then, and her team, actually make it up and make it into a, recreate it essentially. And, Judy says very clearly, she's, conservation is fine, but restoration is what it's about. And in the end, that's the way you have to preserve these things. But it's really an ongoing discussion for all of us to think about. And, we here in the room, live here in LA. What do we want around us? How do we preserve these things? And for us as a generation, like, how do we preserve these murals going forward, and what's appropriate? But to answer the original question, like, do I know of efforts to restore these facades in Rome? Not as far as I know. I mean, I would love to hear them if people know about them. I'm very curious. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I would like to say also, grazie mille, let me say thank you to your colleague, John Giurini, who was fundamental in organizing this program. I would like to say grazie to everybody who attended here in person, everybody who connected online with us tonight. And I would like to remind everyone to just go and visit this beautiful exhibition at the Getty Center. Grazie mille, Julian.
Thank you. And actually, and I would say, I've been, over the course of my talk, tantalizing you with meals and ice cream and, coffee. But now those in the room here can at least go for a real drink, like a glass of wine. And those online, please, help yourselves, of course.
Thank you. Grazie. Arrivederci.